Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Dispatches. I'm your host, Brady Kreitzer. Our guest today is Rick Gardiner, and he'll be discussing his new article focusing on asking really one of the timeless questions in those who study the life of George Washington. Who was his teacher, and can we ever know for sure? Rick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Rick, you're a first-time guest, JAR contributor, of course. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I took my PhD at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and I taught for 10 years at the university level and prefer the high school level.
Excellent. So, Rick, let's dive into the article a little bit. Wonderful piece. What made you want to write this article now?
Well, I was put on to largely to The Life of George Washington's by Weems, which is generally not acceptable, but started to look at it more carefully and found that in his first or second chapter there, he talks about John Hobby being Washington's first teacher. And just wanted to look into that and see if there's any validity to it.
So, Rick, for some background for those who don't know, we know a great deal about George Washington's life. What do we know about his educational background? What's kind of the existing story?
Well, I think the existing story is that he was taught by tutors. He didn't receive any formal education. Mostly taught either by tutors or self-taught, or in some fashion, some way he was taught in Fredericksburg.
One of the things I really love about your article, Rick, is that it's not just a historical analysis, it's a historiography as well to a degree. So let's talk about the sources we have, maybe kind of the old story about Washington's education. Some of them are looked at, I think, with suspicion. Is that fair to say?
Some of the source material, certainly Parson Weems is come under scrutiny as not being scholarly in his approach.
Could you tell us maybe a bit about the problems with Weems? I think for people who don't know, they may run into this, they may read this as gospel. We do have some issues. Could you maybe take us through some of the problems?
Well, sure. The majority of people see Weems as being very moralistic, hyper moralistic. He doesn't give clear citations to his sources. The Life of Washington, which he published 1806, is the version that I'm talking about. Is not considered a scholarly piece as much as an educational piece, even moralistic piece.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. This is where we get the cherry tree story, right?
Indeed, indeed.
Okay, so we all know that book. Even we sort of know that's apocryphal as well. Let's get into a little more, I think, deeper history, maybe things that may be unusual. You really dig into this in the article. It's this idea of Augustine Washington, George's father, bringing in what he calls convict servants. Why was he doing that, and why in the world would he want one of these convict servants to teach his son?
Well, we know that a number of convicts were sent exiled to Virginia. That's a matter of historical fact. The fact that Augustine hired one of these gentlemen to tutor his son George is probably what my article really deals with more than anything. the convicts were indeed their indentures were purchased, um, and that was done pretty frequently. Augustine hired a number of them, and then he published in the Virginia Gazette about them leaving, running away, as it were. So we do know that he did in fact hire convict servants. Why would he Why would he hire one as a tutor? Some of these convicts were actually quite literate. We know that Charles Peel, for example, the father of Charles Wilson Peel, was a convict and was hired by Alexander Spotswood, who was eventually the governor of Virginia. So that phenomenon is not one that's under any great dispute. The hiring of convicts.
Yeah, Rick, we look at the article. There's kind of been a lingering, as you describe, idea that a man named John Hobby was, if not, the answer to what we're looking for in Washington, teacher, very prominent in his education. Just before we get into what you turned up, because you make some pretty significant discoveries here, what do we know about this John Hobby figure? Was he a legitimate contender for this title?
Well, he certainly was convicted in England, and he was exiled as a punishment for his supposed theft, and was sent to Virginia along with people like Charles Peel and some other. Edward Ormsby was one who was sent on the same ship as Hobby, and was sent. It was exiled to Virginia for that was his sentence for his theft in England. Other than that, we don't have a whole lot of information about his background.
So, Rick, in your article, you have a section which you describe as having new revelations about the history of Washington's education, maybe the history of John Hobby. Could you tell us what you found? And because a lot of people would be interested, maybe your process for finding these new materials.
Well, I used a lot of local history materials, documentation from King George County, which is where Washington grew up, and Spotsylvania County, which is the county which is now taken over that particular area, and some of the local historians who run the local historical societies were very helpful in locating a good number of the documentation about John Hobby and what he did there in Fredericksburg, near Ferry Farm, where George Washington grew up.
Yeah. So what were some of the new things you discovered about him? What makes you feel very confident about maybe his role in the story?
Well, the documentation is quite clear that he was a teacher. He was paid about half a dozen to a dozen times on with regard to his ability to tutor some of the children in that area. He signed a number of documents in King George County. He was a insider with regard to the Strother family and some of the other families that the Washingtons knew in Fredericksburg. He was a sexton of the church that the Washingtons attended. I found all that in the local documentation. So he fits the narrative quite well.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Rick. This has always
Okay.
been kind of a mystery in Washington's life. I'm pretty convinced by what you've published here in this article. Now, for those who want to read it, you can read it at, of course, the Journal of the American Revolution website, allthingsliberty.com. Rick, do you feel like you could definitively say that John Hobby was George Washington's mysterious teacher of his childhood?
I don't. I wouldn't use the word definitively or 100% with anything.
Yeah,
in history
yeah, it's
whatsoever,
good point. Good point.
for that matter. But if I were a betting person, I would say there's more chance that he was than that he wasn't
Yeah,
in terms of that.
excellent. For what it's worth, Rick, I was pretty convinced by it. But I guess, as you said, there's nothing, nothing set in stone in history. Okay, so Rick, we always like to kind of end these interviews with this question. It's kind of broad, but how do you think this article helps us understand the Revolutionary Era better?
Well, I certainly think it helps us understand George Washington a little better. And he is obviously key to the revolution. So I think it goes to Washington's education. Jonathan Butcher, who taught George Washington's son, indicated that George Washington himself was tutored by um, a convict purchased by his father, and John Hobby fits that very well.
Mm, excellent. Rick, one of the things we really try to do here at the Journal of the American Revolution, one of the reasons I think it's been successful, is that we have really opened up the idea of the historical forum beyond, I think, the limitations of a lot of traditional journals. Along with university faculty, we publish pieces by museum exhibit designers, museum curators, and one of the great resources we have, of course, are people who teach at the K-12 level. I think everyone in here is is really a meaningful contributor to history, something we've all known for a long time, but we need people to understand. One of the people I often call upon when I'm stuck is a high school teacher. He knows more about this particular subject than most people I've ever met, so he's still my go-to person and a mentor to me. Rick, if you could, you mentioned something in the beginning of the interview I think is really important, and I hope a lot of other K-12 teachers here. But you said you prefer the high school level. You're still getting your message across. You like just that format a little better. Could you maybe go into that a little bit, why that is the case, and why maybe other high school or middle school teachers may want to submit here at the Journal of the American Revolution?
Well, the high schoolers I teach mostly 10th through 12th grade, and they're very open. They're very willing to consider things and to be playful in their education. And whereas college students, my experience with them anyway, is that they're a little above that, and they make it less enjoyable because of that, because of their arrogance to some degree. The college students tend to be a little more difficult to get through to.
Maybe a little more cynical, maybe a little less
Yes.
enthusiastic.
Yeah. All those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're grateful for you, Rick, and really just a stellar piece of research. So thank you again for joining us.
I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay.